Hello, everybody. My name is Jimmy Carroll. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Tech B2B Marketing, and welcome to this episode of the Manufacturing Matters podcast, where we discuss the trends and technologies shaping the manufacturing industry today. Today's a Friday, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Anthony Jules, who's the CEO of Robust AI. Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Jimmy, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be on the show.
Well, I love it. Thanks so much. Well, let's get right into it then. So, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about maybe your background and the company and what you do there.
Yeah, so my background is I studied robotics and AI at MIT many years ago, then was part of the founding team of a company called Sapient that built very large information systems for Fortune 500 companies and had a career through there, also doing video games, and then ended up back in robotics, which landed me at Google building robots there for a few years. So my career has taken me through a few large companies and many different startups. And my focus has always been on building systems where people and technology have a very intimate connection. And that's everything from collaborative robots that I do now to video games, to systems that people spend 8 hours a day in front of, where you really need the user experience to be polished.
Yeah, a lot of interesting companies you've worked for there. So tell us a little bit about the current one and what you're doing, and maybe what you guys are most excited about right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. So at Robust AI, we're building collaborative mobile robots. Our first robot, Carter, is a little bit tongue in cheek. It's named that way because it actually looks like a cart. It's a shelf that drives itself around. It's the most advanced autonomous mobile robot that we know. But it's very intentionally made to have a form factor that's familiar to people
Mm.
so that adoption is very easy. And it's designed for manufacturing and for warehouse automation.
So that's interesting, right? One of the things that's come up over the years in terms of robotic adoption and like sort of the general public's acceptance of robotics is the way they look. And I don't want to venture into humanoids, at least not yet. But is that also sort of an intentional idea of like, here are these people that might be working in warehouses or factories or wherever. We don't we want to make something that feels comfortable and not something that feels like threatening to them. Is that something that's
Absolutely. That's a big part of the design decision.
mm,
And I have a few principles. It's probably too long for right now, but one of them is every robot is a promise, and the way it looks tells you a lot about what that promise is. This is true of every product, but it's even more so with robots and things that articulate in the world. So we very intentionally built the robot to have a familiar form factor so that it's non-threatening, because the promise is we increase productivity, but we don't replace all the people. That's
right.
not what we're built around. So that literally comes out in the shape of the robot and all of the experience that you have in terms of how you interact with the robot.
Mm. Okay, so that's a really good response because it's kind of a segue into a question that I wanted to ask. Is maybe 7 or 8 years ago, somewhere in that range, where reports started coming out about, hey, robots are not actually taking your jobs. In fact, they're oftentimes creating jobs. And it feels like in the last couple of years, anyway, and this is just my own experience, and you can let me know if you think I'm wrong or if you agree. It feels like we're sort of almost getting over the hump of, hey, robots aren't taking your jobs. You're here to do specific tasks. It's cliche, but dull, dirty, dangerous jobs, repetitive jobs. I mean, if you look at labor shortage, there are jobs available now that people just don't even want to do. So like robotics are kind of, it feels anyway like um, starting to be starting to be accepted at least. But then, and this is a perfect question for you because your company's called Robust AI, and you have AI enabled collaborative mobile robots. Now comes the fear of AI, right? And the fear of AI, it's mostly in the general public, I would say. In the industrial space, it might lean a bit more towards skepticism than skepticism than fear. But it's kind of a two-part question. Is one is like, when you're talking to somebody who is outside of the industrial space, and they and they fear it, you tell them that you work at an AI company if they don't already know. Um, how do you let them know that, hey, AI is not here to enslave us or do
Mhm.
this or that? It's here to better society and make jobs more efficient and so on.
Yeah. So a few big ideas in there. The first thing that I start with is, I'm honest about it, and I give my real perspective, which is these technologies won't replace people everywhere. But I'm really honest in saying there is going to be labor disruption. Jobs are going to change. There's no
Mhm.
way around that. That has been true, um, and accelerated really from the Industrial Revolution through now. And that's not a surprise to most people. The real question they have is, okay, so then what kinds of jobs should I be thinking about? Is my particular kind of job going to change? Then I usually just share more detail about what I think is going to change and what's been surprising. So I think when people think about robots and think about AI, um, they assume that it takes away all manual labor. Well, one of the things that we've figured out and is it's not actually ideal either financially or in terms of process to get all people out of workflows. People and robots add different value. And having people in a process gives you an adaptability and a different set of quality checks than automated systems give you. And by
Mhm.
combining people and robots, you actually end up with something that is higher productivity than over indexing on either, higher quality than over indexing on either, and higher adaptability than over indexing on either one. So there is this win win, which is what the future that we want to design, where the combination of people and machines actually get a lot more done and do it at a higher quality level. And that's really the goal. And the final thing I'll share on that is, and we're at the absolute beginning of this, and we're designing what these patterns are going to look like. We're all figuring this out together right now. And because of that, we're going to see a lot of change before we get to patterns that are stable.
Mm. It's such a good answer, and that's one of the things that have working in this space. Obviously, not at the same level as you, but we're in the industrial space as well in terms of our clients. Is when I talk to people about AI, is AI is only as good as the data that you train it with, and people are required, like human in the loop. Input is required for and constantly improving AI models, and you need people for that.
Yeah, I think you need people to improve the AI models, but I also think the best systems have people in the loop at a supervisory or monitoring, in a supervisory or monitoring capacity.
Hmm.
Because again, what that gives you is all the power of whatever that AI system does and the contextual um, reference and checking that a person can bring to it. So, these systems aren't perfect and are never going to be perfect. And what's really clear, and I think many people have had these examples now, which is when they're wrong in ways that seem so obvious to people that it's often comical, because they're not intelligent like us. It
Hmm.
really is a very different mode of computing where these things are trained on lots and lots of examples, and then you build a system based on all those examples. And when you meander into questions or that where there isn't a specific answer that it's been trained on, it does some type of guess in between the things that are closest. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that goes off the rails.
Yeah.
You really do need uh, people in this human in the loop at multiple levels for these systems to be the most productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And within staying within the context of AI, physical AI is a term that I've been seeing used uh, quite a bit more lately. And I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you? And then within the context of robust AI specifically, what impact does physical AI have when it comes to the design patterns for robots that work alongside people?
Yeah. So, first I'll start with the definition maybe. So physical AI is intelligence applied to systems that move and act in the real world. Um, it's a lot of what we would just have called robotics previously, but I do think it allows a bit more breadth in definition, and it lets people pull in ideas around generative AI and things that are now more familiar to the general audience. And it's not just about perception, um, but robots need to understand context and behave accordingly in the world. And it's really trying to bring a rich understanding of the world into the decision loop that some robot or even some thermostat is using to make decisions. So when robots share space with people, especially, design patterns shift. So you need, um, we believe people have to have agency so that they stay comfortable. And then you're not fighting backlash constantly. And so that when people know the right answer, they can implement that change immediately and effectively, and therefore get more productivity, handle exceptions in seconds instead of minutes to hours. Um, so you need agency, clarity, and responsiveness in these systems. So our approach blends computer vision, real-time reasoning, a lot of user experience and user design and user-centered design, so that the way that people interact with these systems feels incredibly intuitive and really straightforward.
Mhm. What in a past life, I was an editor at a magazine that covered machine vision and industrial automation too, but primarily machine vision. So a lot of times my brain goes to visual inspection for AI, but in the last couple of years, it's really gone much further than that. Given all the use cases we've seen, real world actual AI deployments, whether it's whatever, um, mobile robots or AI for predictive maintenance or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
What are some other ways that you've seen AI benefiting manufacturing and warehouse environments today beyond, you know, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, so I think the first one that comes to mind is smarter routing and workflow optimization. That's been a problem that, I have this joke whenever AI gets really good, it stops being AI. So there's a lot of stuff around routing and workflow optimization that has its basis in AI, and it continues to have some parts that are more modern AI, but a lot of it now is just thought of as operations research. But this was all built in AI labs over the last 40 years. So the stuff that's new is doing that smarter routing and workflow optimization with robots and people adapting in real time. That makes the computational complexity of the problem explode. So that's a place where AI is useful. You also mentioned, predictive analytics and maintenance. I think I can't not mention that one, because I think it's so important. And as much as we already do, I think the penetration on that's maybe 5%. There's so many more places where we are not yet using the data that we have access to understand how to have systems have higher uptime and higher productivity. The other piece is really using AI and sensing to have better interaction and collaboration with floor associates, workers in manufacturing or floor associates in warehouses. This is one of the places where I think we really push the envelope, because a person's experience with the robot governs how that system then gets adopted over time. And by using AI and understanding where the robot is, where the person is, how the robot's addressing the person, um, having the robot present as few choices as possible so that the cognitive load on the person is as low as possible. These are, again, just some of the things that we've started to do. And I think we are just scratching the surface on the power there. And I think just fundamentally, AI turns data into decisions, in improving, it has the ability to improve everything, but there's a lot of nuance and a lot of iteration that's necessary for us to get to the right answers.
It really this is more of an observation than anything, but it really feels like, AI is not new, but it feels like it's the dawn of a new era almost, right? Like Dr. Andrew Ng says AI is the new electricity, and then at the A3 Business Forum this past January, there's industry leaders saying, hey, like industrial automation has existed for a long time, but in a lot of ways we're only just beginning. So it's going to be very, very exciting to see how AI gets used. You mentioned like 5% deployment. Like, how can AI transform everything, really? And one last thought there is that I saw somebody on LinkedIn post a meme or whatever it was and said something to the effect of AI is not going to take your jobs. People who are good at AI are going to take your jobs. So
I, I've seen that one and I 100% agree with it. It's funny. I was going to say that in response to what you were asking, because it is pervasive. And it's stunning how pervasive it is when you step back and you look at the AI that we're talking about. So, generative AI that's available to the broad audience works on text and works on generating images and generating short amounts of video.
mhm.
That is all these systems do so far. As much as I'm a roboticist and we're building an AI-enabled collaborative robot, we are just starting that journey. If ChatGPT represents what something like chatbots can provide in terms of value, and let's say they're halfway into that journey or 25% into that journey, I suspect they would say, I think physical AI and robotics is 2% into its journey. We don't even have the data to really make these systems as effective and capable as they'll be in 5 years and 10 years. So I think the adoption of the adoption of AI is just beginning and starting to accelerate. So I think some of the things we're going to see is more and more rise of collaborative robots, for example, using more vision and more information from the real world to drive that change.
I could probably sit here and ask you questions about AI for the rest of the day, given your background and just my overall curiosity with it. But I do want to cover a little bit of the robotic stuff too. And you just said something that kind of tripped my brain. You know, there's been some standard news about like the definition of collaborative robot and what that actually is, and but in general, right, like on the topic of robots working alongside people, what are some of the, and obviously AI, but what are some of the trends and technologies that are reshaping the way that robots and humans can work together on the factory floor or the warehouse today?
Um, I think probably the biggest overall trend is the need for systems that are more adaptive and flexible. I think um, this has been affecting manufacturing really over the last couple of decades, where you have more and more attempts at doing things that are high mix, medium or low volume. And what that means is you need to set up a process, run it for some amount of time, and pull it down, as opposed to set up a process and have it run largely the same way for years at a time. And that need for flexibility is one of the drivers for for collaborative robots, excuse me, for collaborative robots that work with people and are more adaptive. So some of the things that drive that are using modern AI to have much better and much more flexible vision systems to allow dynamic navigation in environments, using techniques like visual SLAM, visual simultaneous localization and mapping, so that robots can know where they are just by what they're seeing in cameras. And then using those cameras to also understand the environment semantically, understanding that that's a person, you know, that's a, that's a machine, that's a forklift. And that context allows the robot to more appropriately move through the world or address people or other tools in the world appropriately.
Yeah.
And it's really the weaving together of those things that will allow us to have systems that are very adaptable and dynamic in the environments that they're in.
Yeah. Speaking of, the environments they're in, and going back to that thought of, in a lot of ways, industrial automation is only just beginning. A lot of small and medium-sized enterprises or businesses today aren't really using industrial automation technologies like robots and AI. And maybe they have some level of it, but um, I think that area, that space, right, is ripe for growth. You guys refer to this idea of designing robots for real people. Do you see like your technology being something like an enabling technology for these companies that maybe don't have on-site integrators or engineers that can support these systems to be able to maybe lower the barrier to adoption?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jimmy. It's I'll say that's where we're going, and that's a big part of our vision. And we're a startup, and we have giant contracts with a couple of giant companies right now, so that's really pushing us forward. But we've designed from the beginning. We've built for associates on the warehouse floor, on the shop floor, and not just for engineers. The vision here is this technology needs to become simple enough to integrate and use that it can serve that middle market, especially small and medium enterprise. What we've seen, from the research we've done, we believe that slow adoption there is primarily because the value proposition is unclear and the ROI is unclear.
Yeah.
There's a lot of friction, and people are forced to be in a position where they think, okay, I need to write a big check just to figure out if this thing might work for us. And as anyone, including myself, who's run a small or medium business, that's not a decision you can make. So part of our vision is really reducing that friction, as robots should feel more like tools that you already know how to use, so that they can look at it and say, oh, I know how this can impact my business. And
Yeah.
they can make that first step. And that's really what we've been designing to. So I mentioned, we have a big partnership with DHL Supply Chain. And we just recently made public that one of our deployments with them showed a 60% productivity increase in the picking operation that we worked on with them. That's what the big guys are going to see. And as we make this simpler and as we make it more approachable, I actually think companies in mid-market can see much bigger impacts than that, because they're actually starting at a less optimized place. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and respect to companies like DHL and others that allow you to go public with it, because oftentimes that ROI number is out there somewhere, but it's under heavy NDA and you can't find out what it is, and no one knows, and it's difficult for these bigger companies, smaller companies, to learn from the bigger companies, because they say, yeah, we've got these contracts with XYZ, but we can't talk to you about them,
yeah.
and that's a challenge.
It is, and I think we're very appreciative of DHL letting us share that, and that's the result of an almost 2-year relationship. So,
Mm. Uh, actually, it was this month. It's almost June. At the Automate show, and the last couple of years, I've seen at Automate AMRs just continue to become more popular, more widespread, larger demo areas at the shows, and you just see, like, you can see the booth size growing for a lot of these companies, that even these companies that are not startups, that have been around for a long time, growing exponentially over the years. And I'm just curious, from your perspective as someone who's been in the industry a long time and works at a company that makes them, what do you see as some of the primary growth drivers for AMRs? Like, I know we've talked about AI and vision systems, but like, what about things like easier to use fleet management software or whatever else? What are some?
Yeah, so I think you hit a couple of them on the head. We are betting on vision-based robots, so vision-based navigation. We use visual simultaneous localization and mapping, where we've actually stepped away from the two-dimensional LiDAR. A 2D LiDAR just gives you information about one slice of the world. Robots that work indoors and at scale can't afford, and it's not the right sensor to use a giant 3D LiDAR. So we've gone to only cameras, and we're riding the exponential of those technologies becoming cheaper and more accessible, and the cost of an incredible amount of AI compute, taking the input from those cameras, has come down significantly. So that's one driver. You mentioned another one. Fleet management software is getting better and better, and many of the big players have pushed for interoperability, which is something we built for, from the beginning, in a way that I think will actually serve, of course, the big players well, but will help shape the industry. So that's certainly another big driver. But if we step back, kind of even one step back, I mentioned a little bit about this before. I think the biggest driver is flexibility. Companies can start small and scale. They can change the layout of a facility, and the robots, remapping a space can be done very, very quickly. So for example, we've mapped a space that was 250,000 square feet in 3 hours. You just kind of flip the script on how it just doesn't take nearly as much time and effort to set up, install, and deploy these more modern systems.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, like LiDAR, I mean, the price came down a bit, but it's still expensive. And on the other end of things, by using, just cameras, technologies like 3D have really almost like come of age in terms of their size and their cost and their capabilities. And I imagine that has that's been a driving factor in terms of companies like yours being able to say, we don't necessarily need LiDAR, we can use these now. Is that the case?
Oh, absolutely. My position is the right setup of cameras and depth sensing gives you a much richer and a much more dependable understanding of what's around the robot. And that's I believe the biggest input into both safety and capability. If you give a human the equivalent of a 2D LiDAR, you put on a helmet with one really thin line in it. Most people would feel pretty impaired in terms of their ability to move around and not bump into stuff. As a roboticist, I'm proud of what we've accomplished as an industry in getting 2D LiDAR to work as well as it does. But I think it's pretty intuitively clear that if you have a system that literally understands what's around it just by being able to see all around itself, and have better depth perception than a person, so these robots actually see better than us, because it's not vaguely that thing's further than something else. No, there's an object that's 1.2 meters away from me. It's calibrated. I know where that thing is. And I think that type of rich understanding of the world is a direct input to make robots both more capable and safer.
I always appreciate a good analogy, and that's a great one. So if I use it in the future, I'll give you credit. I promised to ask about it because I really genuinely want to know your opinion. Humanoids, right? It's a hot topic. There were some humanoids at Automate. A couple of them were moving. So that's a good thing, right? Where do you come down on the debate of, why do we need humanoids versus wheeled robots? And if you don't necessarily want to answer that, just if you have thoughts on humanoids in general, I'd love to know.
Oh, I'm happy to answer it. I'm a roboticist at heart. I'm a kid who's excuse me, who started programming at 11, wrote my first video game at 16, and knew I was going to study robotics and AI, when I was a teenager. So humanoids are part of the dream that all roboticists share. So it's we're already tipped in that direction. Um, and when I look at it, I think humanoids absolutely have a place. But I don't think they're the only modality that's going to provide value to customers. So I sometimes will say this to help people kind of tease things apart, which is robots are going to walk, some with 2 legs, some with 4. Robots are going to fly. We see drones all over the place. Robots are going to sail and dive. They're going to be in water moving around. And robots are going to roll. These are all the modalities. And when you think of it that way, you realize, oh, these don't actually do the same job. They don't actually do the same thing. A drone isn't going to do what a quadruped does,
Mhm.
and certainly not going to do what a submersible does. So when you start looking at it, wheeled robots are really about portage. They're about moving stuff around. There's a reason that we invented the wheel and then we invented the cart. And for 5,000 years, we've been putting stuff on platforms with wheels and dragging it because it's so much more efficient than carrying a box around. We actually can't move stuff long distances without rolling. So I think the thing I want people to tease apart is you're going to have different form factors. We're going to have different morphologies. They're just going to be good at different things. And they're all complementary when used appropriately.
Mm.
So on the one hand, I'm of course a big supporter of humanoids. They're part of the dream that all roboticists have. And they're not the solution for all problems. So we're complementary to humanoids, not competitive with them. So
Yeah.
legs and wheels don't necessarily do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Fair. Given your background, and you just told me that you started coding at programming at 11, and knew you were going to be into robots and AI as a teenager. That plus your career. Do you have any advice out there, either for young students wanting to get into robotics, or maybe robotic startups, in
mhm.
terms of scaling and adapting to the ever evolving customer need?
Yeah, so I think this is as free advice, it's worth every penny. I would say. But and I think this may come through in a lot of the things that I say, which is I really think um, focus on building value, focus on understanding some customer or understanding some need, understanding a set of pain points, and really figure out how you can solve a problem for someone in the real world. Um, and as roboticists and people working in AI, we have to do that and we have to navigate the hype at the same time
Mm.
because it's good and bad that we're now in a space that the whole world is paying attention to in a way that wasn't true 5 years ago. And because of that, there's a lot of hype, and that's good and bad. It's good in that it's a little bit easier to explain what we do and why it might be valuable, but it's bad in that it sets unreasonable expectations for some of the things that we're trying to do and some of the things that can add a huge amount of value.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, sort of like the idea of like find a problem and then find a fix for that problem, right? Instead of just trying to build a general purpose product and say you might need this.
exactly. Don't yeah. Make sure you have a need, and then
Yeah,
build to that need.
fair enough. Anthony, anything else we haven't talked about that you feel like would be important to mention in today's industrial automation manufacturing climate?
Um, I don't think anything new, but it just strikes me that we're at such an incredible moment in history, both in terms of AI and what's happening, in terms of robotics and physical AI and what's happening, and we're just at the beginning of this journey. So maybe I'll go back maybe to the first thing that we said, which is as much as we feel like the change is never ending right now, um, that's going to be the constant for the next couple of decades. we're going to have more options for how we increase productivity, how we collaborate with robots and each other, how we build value. And the hard part's going to be selecting from the incredible abundance that's available, not is there a way to get X, Y, or Z done?
Yeah.
I find it's such an amazing moment right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's indeed a very exciting time to be involved in this space, in this community, and I, for one, look forward to everything involved in it, including following the trajectory of robust AI and the Carter robot and everything exciting you guys got down the road. So, if anybody else has questions, or if anybody has questions rather, or wants to learn more about robust AI, it's robust.ai. And if you've got questions for Anthony, I'd be happy to take those and pass them along. You can reach out to us at manufacturing-matters.com. Otherwise, thank you everybody for listening. And Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed this and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. It was a pleasure to be on the show.